again. So I encourage whoever watches this video to watch the one immediately before it. So the video that I'm wearing this outfit, essentially, because in that video, I did mention that when I was little, ever since I was really little, I've had a fascination with severe weather. And what really kicked it off, really just inspired it, is the movie Twister. I don't know if it's so I'm only 27 years old. I don't know if it's considered an old movie now, or if it's still just, a regular movie. So any young people who might watch this, let me know, have you heard of Twister or not? Help me learn how old I am. So I watched that when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and it just really unlocked a passion within me. And basically until high school, when I was in chemistry class and I learned that I suck at chemistry. It doesn't click for me. I love physics clicks for me. I was always good at math, but chemistry just doesn't click. Maybe if I went to school now that my brain's a little different, maybe I could do it. But I don't know. So what I wanted to do, so this will explain why I mentioned that. Until high school, my dream was to be a severe weather meteorologist. I would have loved to get a PhD and research severe weather, and I would also have loved to pair it with architectural engineering, because what my ultimate goal was to study severe weather and use the knowledge of that and put it together with the knowledge of architectural engineering, because I have a knack for designing things. I'll post a video from high school of this toothpick bridge that I built with one of my friends at the time, and it held a significant amount of weight, and I didn't do any calculations. I just knew arches and triangles are the way to go, and just kind of went with the flow, which encouraged me to begin college. Back when I started college in 2011, it was for civil engineering. So that was one of the original intentions, was to put the understanding of engineering, of structures, and knowledge of severe weather, pairing those together to essentially save more lives from severe weather impacts, such as hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, what have you. I wanted to eventually research structures, materials, and the cost of production to make more inexpensive housing safer for people, because a lot of casualties from severe weather is from mobile homes. So that's something else you learn about me, is I had a fascination with severe weather. Now, in the previous video, so again, just connecting that bridge before I move on. So that's why I said up until high school, when I learned that I suck at chemistry, I focused on, I wanted to go to school for architecture, but not as many schools had programs for architecture. And the school I chose that I wanted to go to, it had civil engineering, and I really liked the program when I toured. So that's where I ended up. I did not complete my studies as a civil engineer. That is another story for another time. But for the purposes of this video, I wanted to explain more the psychology, at least for me. Again, I don't have a degree in psychology. I'm not a counselor. I have an AA degree, and a certificate in baking and pastry. I'll put a link to my Instagram for my baking and pastry page for anyone who's curious about that. So it's another thing you can learn about me today, and how it goes to show that every person has their own unique interests. So the psychology behind my unique interest of severe weather, I wanted to provide for you today. So let me know what you think of this. If you have any opinions, maybe if you're a psychologist or psychiatrist, or you have any professional input, or maybe you relate to me, let me hear from you. So I put together, I believe the reasons I was so intrigued with severe weather is the adrenaline rush that I would experience from the idea of like chasing a tornado or being in the middle of an earthquake. Like I love that adrenaline rush that you get from that fight or flight experience that you gather from severe weather whenever your life is in jeopardy, or that is correlated to, and maybe inspired by, and like maybe it's derivative is this, or maybe it was just heightened by this, but my traumatic childhood. So I grew up in a narcissistic household, and in these kinds of households, the children are basically everybody who's part of the harem of, so those who do the bidding and are controlled by essentially the head narcissist. In my family, it was the mother, and then my father, and then my siblings and I were the harem, the people who had to do her bidding and mesh with her, under her control. So in this kind of family dynamic, everybody's always tiptoeing on eggshells. It's what's called an eggshell life. I'm waiting for that motorcycle to pass. So anyways, you're constantly in a fight or flight mode, and adrenaline is constantly running in your brain. And because for my mother specifically, you never knew when she was going to go off. For her, she had what I call anger fits. She would just go in a rage, and it's not just like she was angry and you just didn't know what was going to poke her. No, like her fits were just losing her mind, like yelling, shouting at us, cursing at us, calling us names, like going around the house, making sure that we were cleaning, doing chores, screaming at us, like, hitting us if she deemed necessary. So, and that's from her own mental health conditions, which were derived from her own childhood, which is generational on my maternal side of the family, which I'll explain later at another day. So in the household, I grew up in constant fight or flight mode just every day in the house as a child. So I'm constantly running on adrenaline there. And I explain in a blog post that I used to be a short track speed skater when I was younger. With that, and then I was a daredevil when I was little. I was always seeking the next adrenaline rush. I also sought that next adrenaline rush through severe weather. Seeking that adrenaline rush offers, what happens in the brain is whenever you get that adrenaline rush, it offers a little break for those who are constantly in that fight or flight mode, with a constant state of adrenaline always running through them. So when I had adrenaline rushes, I got a little bit of a break. I got to have the feel good hormones coming through me. I got to feel good for a little bit. So that is something that did drive me to pursue that goal when I was a child, to be a severe weather meteorologist. And I believe part of the derivative of it, or at least what encouraged me to pursue that goal, was that adrenaline rush I would have from the idea of severe weather, experiencing that fight or flight mode. And that comes from the constant fight or flight mode that I would be experiencing as a child in a chronically, so this is where the CPTSD comes from. The C in PTSD, chronic. So my childhood was chronically traumatic. Trauma isn't just one experience. It's not just one event. It's not limited to those, though you can be traumatized from one event, one experience. That is possible. Even a pandemic. It's 1 year now that everybody's been in a pandemic. That is traumatic for people as well. But for me in my childhood, part of my trauma, so the chronic is years and years and years, I grew up in a traumatic environment because my household, in a narcissistic family dynamic, when everybody is fight or flight mode because nobody can settle down and actually relax, you're constantly wondering, when is mom going to explode the next time? And experiencing that verbal and emotional abuse on a regular basis. And then also on top of that, emotional neglect. I was the invisible child growing up. As an adult who has gone no contact with her family of origin, I'm now what's known as the black sheep. as the invisible child, my parents never tended to me, never asked me how my day was. I was just kind of left to my own. I was a good kid, fortunately, but even then, I did not have an emotional connection with either of my parents, which contributes to emotional immaturity and the overall trauma of the childhood, because I did not have a solid sense that my parents loved me. I never had that security. So that forced me to be what a lot of people notice about me even to this day. I'm an old soul. I'm mature for my age. That's because I kind of had to grow up. I took care of myself in many ways. My parents provided like the food and shelter, but emotionally I was on my own, and I did manage a lot of my own. That a child, I would never expect my own children to be alone in figuring out. So I hope that this video explained a little bit about the psychology behind what I mentioned in the video before this, that my fascination with severe weather, the psychology behind it. And what I wanted to leave off with is further with the psychology. How much of me wanting to provide shelter, safe, and reduce casualties from severe weather is actually my inner self, my subconscious, responding to the trauma, not from a tornado or something, but how much of that was the tornado symbolizes my family, the trauma and that fight or flight mode, that adrenaline rush that I experience, or like the adrenaline running through my head constantly in my family life. So, the tornadoes, the trauma, the turmoil that's going on within that family life. How much of me that wanted to research severe weather and architecture to provide a strong foundation and the causes of the casualties. How much of that was me wanting to know more about the mental, the subconscious, that leads to the causes of the unstable foundational structure of my family of origin. And then saving lives, how much of me wanting to prevent, as much as I could do it and totally apply it to this day in another life, maybe as a meteorologist and engineer, how much of that was me wanting to engineer my family of origin, wanting to engineer myself to save my life, to save lives that I would create. Now I am very protective of my children, and now I'm more protective of myself from the trauma, the turmoil, the tornado of life that I lived in growing up that created who I am. That is the psychology that I have to hypothesize of my passion for severe weather, wanting to chase tornadoes when I was little, wanting to research the severe weather, wanting to collaborate or even study for myself strong foundational structures. How much of that was me responding to the tornado, the trauma, the turmoil in everyday life, and wanting to make strong structural foundations for family life and personal life? Exactly what I'm doing now. Maybe I'm being an architect of family structure, being the one who's breaking the cycles of mental and emotional abuse and the generational cycle that I have. And how much of me wanting to study that severe weather is me studying the severe abuse or pains of emotional and mental well-being. That's my point today. And if you watch this video entirely and got the big picture of my application of psychology to my childhood passion of severe weather research, let me know your thoughts.